According to the pre-sentence investigation report, it's been 1,080 days. Mr. Dalton has been in jail in Kalamazoo. 1,080 days since he left Tiana Carruthers crumpled in the ground of a parking lot, bleeding and broken, worried less about herself and more about the children that she was with that day, her daughter and her friends, who she had protected and got away from Mr. Dalton's terror that afternoon. It's been 1,080 days since he left Alexis Cornish hiding in a back seat after watching Tyler Smith and his father Richard be shot 16 times, less than 20 feet in front of her. It's been 1,080 days since he left Abigail, 14-year-old little girl. His life was being held together somehow by a police officer. His blood and bones and brain pooled in her lap. 1,080 days since Richard Smith's last moments were to see his son Tyler shot, and then to be shot himself. The two of them shot over and over 16 times. 1,080 days since Mary Jo Nye and Mary Lou Nye, Dorothy Brown and Barbara Hawthorne were left dead and dying in cars parked at a Cracker Barrel restaurant parking lot. 1,080 days since he terrorized this entire community. A place I love, a place I work every day to protect and to make better. A place that's been changed forever by his choices, by his actions. 1,080 days in jail is barely a down payment for the damage that you've caused. It's nothing in comparison to the loss of a loved one, to the alteration, to the change in the future for Abigail and Alexis, Tiana. You're 48 years old. By my count, you're going to live somewhere between 25 and 30 years likely. Another 10,000 days. 10,000 days in a Michigan prison where I hope that every morning you wake up seeing the faces of those you've killed and injured. Where when you lay down at night, I hope the last thought is the damage that you've done to this community, to those families, to your own. 10,000 days doesn't come close to what you deserve. I wish somehow it could be more. Because you deserve more. When we leave today, families of those that you've killed, the survivors, will gather together and we'll celebrate the lives of the loved ones that we've lost, the lives of those who somehow managed to survive. And we'll celebrate that you'll no longer be here in Kalamazoo. Today, you'll be taken downstairs to the basement of this building, placed in shackles, put in a van, and driven away from Kalamazoo. And I hope you'll never, ever return. They're going to take you down the road to Jackson, and tonight you'll spend your first night, the first of those 10,000 nights, in prison, where you deserve to be until you die. With regard to the recommendations in this case, Your Honor, the sentences are mandatory. For each of the first-degree murder counts, we would ask that you sentence Jason Dalton to life in prison without the possibility of parole. For each of the felony firearm counts, the sentences again are mandatory, and we would ask that you sentence the defendant to 2 years in prison consecutive to those underlying counts. With regard to the 2 charges of assault with intent to commit murder, the sentencing guidelines barely begin to recommend a sentence that would somehow fit what Mr. Dalton has done. Those sentencing guidelines recommend a minimum sentence starting at a maximum of 225 months, and for all practical purposes, that time is whatever sentence you impose is going to be served concurrently with the mandatory life without the possibility of parole. But we would ask that the court sentence the defendant at the top of those guidelines to a minimum sentence of 225 months in prison and to a maximum sentence of 40 years in prison as recommended in the pre-sentence investigation report. Today is the last day that Kalamazoo will suffer Jason Dalton. Tomorrow will continue to be a community that is somehow rallied together, that will support these victims' families, that will support our survivors, that will continue to be stronger despite everything that you have done. And we'll celebrate that you will never, ever, ever be with us again.